Mark. I can't thank him enough. For him to come and share his heart and to lead us in worship, I'm really appreciative. I think I know most people here. For the record, my name is Jim Stuart, and I'll be your captain for today's journey. But like life, there may be a little turbulence here and there, so if you reach down to your left and to your right, you'll find your seat belts. Just secure them in snugly. And even if we encounter some turbulence, rest assured, Jesus has the wheel, so we'll be okay. Our game plan for today, overall, is kind of a continuation. Over the last few weeks, we've had to focus on our work as a mission field, and we also focused on some questions. Question number 1 was, how does your work contribute to the good of others? Number 2, what talents do you use most in your work? Number 3, what brings you the greatest satisfaction in your work? And 4, how do you try to represent the presence of Christ in your work? Now, these are important questions for all of us to be mindful of and to ponder today as we get to hear a few more stories as our speakers come and share their experiences and their background. And as they share their stories and tie in those concepts, I think it's also important that we remember that we all have stories. We all have different backgrounds, experiences, challenges, personalities, and really gifts. And those combine together to make each of us very unique. And whoever we are, it's a good reminder that we need to use ourselves for the kingdom. So first up, we have the privilege of having a manufacturing executive. Please welcome Mark Wallace as he comes to the stage.
The title sounds pretty important. It's really not. I didn't know what else to say. Really, I think my job is a servant, and I'll explain a little bit. First, I'd like to start with kind of the background that I have and how it affects my work. I'm from the tail end of the baby boomer generation, and when I grew up, there were certain things that were just pretty much pounded into you as first off, it's a man's responsibility to support his family, and you have to work. If you're physically able, you have to work. And at the time, depression, other effects that people had were never really taken into consideration. You were either a worker or you were not. If you have a job, you hold on to your job. To give up a job and get another one was foolish and greedy, is again what I was raised to. And then the final thing was you always contribute to society. So that gave me some direction, but it also gave me some confusion on what I was going to be. But I knew work was important. When I was growing up, my heroes really evolved around work. So anyone in the military, law enforcement, teachers, construction workers, factory workers, doctors, nurses, and farmers were all my heroes at the time. I had no idea what work a student really did. An administration person, which I am now, a pastor, a storekeeper, food service, volunteers. I thought all of that was easy jobs. As I actually got out of the workforce, I found out a lot of those in the latter part were even the more difficult ones. It's easy to look at going into a position and saying that this is what I do, but it really comes down to how you do it. I've been fortunate in the time I've been working that through additional schooling that I had taken while working and having good mentors along the way that I've been able to grow and mature into the type of person I wanted to be as a servant again. My first job that I wanted was to be, I loved electronics. I wanted to either work on robots out in some distant factory out in the tundra or be the guy that manned the old radio stations with the tower out. Any place where I could be without people, basically, is what I wanted to do. So when I came into the workforce, I grew up in the middle of North Dakota where there was literally no diversity. And my first job, real job, I moved to Minneapolis area, and I worked for a company that made semiconductor chips. And all of a sudden I was working around people of different races, different nationalities, different religious backgrounds, and the prejudices that were pretty prevalent where I grew up. I couldn't understand once I met all these people and why there was so much hate or negative comments and everything made. And so it helped me again to start to grow and realize that there's all kinds of people in the world, and it really comes down to, like Martin Luther said about judge them by their character. And so that's what I tried to do as I worked and gained additional skill sets and things. One thing I did find out early on is that I was very good at taking chaos and bringing order to it. And that's really what my main job is now. But early on, when I had a few people that they called it work directing, that when there was a crisis, I could get them calm and we could start focusing on things. And so as I got better and better at that, I started to realize I reached a ceiling where I could never go above and help more people unless I had credentials to do that. So I went back to school for a long time. My wife was very patient. We had little boys at the time. So I was going to graduate school. I was working as a new manager. I was a fireman or a volunteer fireman. So the time we got to spend at home was very, very little. And like on a weekend where it would be, hey, let's sleep out in the tent with the boys, I'd get a fire call and poor Cheryl would be out in the tent with the boys. So, but work was always important to me. Work for a long time defined who I was. You know, the first thing, if anybody asked, you know, who are you or whatever, I always told them what I did. You know, I'm a technician, I'm an engineer, I'm a manager, I'm, you know, whatever it happened to be. It took me a long time to figure out that truly I was a servant on how I worked with people. And so one thing I found is there's people need guidance and they need that servant attitude, whether they report to you or you report to them. And I found now that I do an equal amount of service to both counsel the people that I report to, as well as try and make the life better for the people that report to me. So you think about it, every day somebody comes into work, they've got 100 problems in the back of their mind. You know, they're at work because they're there to support their family, make sure they make their house payment, buy groceries, pay for the car, save for college, all of those reasons that they're there at work. They're not there at work because it's necessarily fun, that's why it's work, right? And I've learned more and more as I work with others is I always initially tried to follow the golden rule, you know, the treat others the way you want to be treated. It had taken me a while to figure out that that's not the right way to look at it. It's treat others as they want to be treated, and that's using, you know, respect and everything. So that's the way I lead. And in my career, I've now gone to companies where I'm hired in to turn a company around. I've had roles from vice president to chief operating officer, you know, all sorts of fancy titles, but in the end, it's bringing order to chaos and trying to help get the people working on a goal, get the managers working on a goal, fix the financials and all of that. But the more I do that, the more I feel that I'm a servant, and I'm able to demonstrate that to the people just by the way or walk the talk, if you want to use that term. An example in a couple of places is you go in and there's turmoil with the employees, and like where I'm at now, the immediate group of people I work with, there's about 400 of them, and there's been a lot of turmoil over the years of where it's basically us versus management, and I'm management. So I have to try and bridge that gap and get trust and everything both ways. And the start of that is really just with simple respect. You know, for me, no matter what company or what type of industry it's in, and again, I've usually been in manufacturing, rather than start at the top, I always start with the worker. They're the person that is really the base of the pyramid or the organization. And in my view, everybody serves that person. Every role should be making their job easier. And what's unfortunate is you usually come into a corporation, it's just the opposite. It's how many executives can we have, and then, oh yeah, the workers out on the floor, they're a pain because they're complaining about everything. So I take a different approach, and because of that, I've been fairly successful, and I've been fired several times too, because the leadership within the company cannot see that level of management style or that level of leadership style. And I'd like to say I'm a leader, not a manager. But again, I'm a servant leader is what I say. But I can give you an example of at the company I'm at now. There was a lot of things that were taken away from the workers, and organization change and tyrant leaders coming in, and so the people were really beaten down, and they were very distrustful of the management within the company. And we had this huge potential for, if we could produce more products and save money, the company would make significant improvements. So I spent the time, and sometimes to my wife's dismay, coming in on a weekend or staying late at night and personally getting to know the people on the floor. Even if there's 4 levels of management in between, there's still the people that set the company up to be successful. So as I learned with some of the employees, things that have happened, and how to level that again so that people trust each other and want to work with each other. And so sometimes it's funny how God throws opportunities right in front of you, and this one, I never would have done this, but things lined up, and again with the support of my wife. We had we're in a fiscal year, so our business year ends at the end of September, and so as we go into the last quarter of the year, the last 3 months, that's when most other companies' year ends. So a lot of companies had all this money to spend, but they had to have it spent by the end of the year. And so in order to produce a product and get it delivered, we had to really step up our production levels. And up to that time, everybody was asked to work 48 hours a week or more. And these people were just spent. I mean, they'd been doing this for a long time. So I sat down with my direct manager, and I said, could we reward them some additional incentive rather than just force them to work? And so we talked about a couple of ways to do that. And I said, here's what I've learned on the production floor. And this was after being there about 2 months, is in the past when they tried to do an incentive for the people, and they said, well, we'll give you a gift card if you stay and work Saturday or whatever day it happened to be, your hours. And so when the people did that, the gift card that they were going to get didn't come for 2 months. And then when the gift card came, it was to, like say, Jeff, if you got a gift card to Bed Bath & Beyond, would you be happy? So proud, well, maybe not. Carrie would be, but so anyway, with stuff like that, they couldn't use them, and it was just such a turmoil, and upper management really didn't take any of that into consideration. They said, yeah, people are just constantly complaining. So when I spoke with my boss, and I said, I think there's a way we could do this to make it beneficial for everybody. I said, these are the last weeks heading up to Christmas. I said, what if we could incentivize the people and give them the option to work or not? If they work, they get this extra reward, and it would be like a Visa card. So they could use it anywhere they wanted. They could instantly use it. They could use it to buy Christmas presents with, or whatever else they needed. And so my boss said, that's a great idea, let's do it. So I'm new to this company, and I had no idea of how the HR department, what hurdles I'd face, or what hurdles I'd face with finance. So I made the assumption that when my boss said, go ahead and do it, that he was going to pave the path for me. And so we had a couple more meetings. I went back to him and I said, you sure we can do this? Because we're going to send an announcement out to all the employees. And so we did. And all the employees were on board, but they were very distrustful about, yeah, the last time this happened. And I stood up in front of all of them, just like with you, and I said, I promise, if you work within 3 days, you will have a gift card in your hand, a Visa card that you can use. So everybody signed up for the weekend. The weekend went through. Monday morning, I went into my boss and I said, where do I pick up the cards? And he goes, oh, we don't do cards. What do you mean you don't do cards? We just had this long talk. He said, yeah, well, I talked to HR and they won't. Just tell the employees that we're going to do this and this. And I said, we can't do that. You know, we're trying to build trust. We're trying to get us to work together. So, you know, when you talk about sometimes God creates events for you, Cheryl and I had just taken out a loan and put some money in savings for college for the boys, and just transferred some things over. So we happen to have this pile in our savings account. We never have that much money in our savings account. And so I went home and I talked to Cheryl and I said, here's the situation I'm in. I said, I know my boss will sign the reimbursement, but we're going to have to take this out of savings in order to buy these cards, in order to give them to the employees. And so we did that. And the employees never knew the difference, nor did we want to. Very few of the other managers knew that's where the cards came from. We did that for 5 weekends of getting employees there. The difference that made in the company is we recovered almost $8 billion in revenue that we would have lost because of not having people there. We had 2,000 hours of extra overtime in key areas and things like that. And by the third time we did that, the employees, they were happy as could be. They couldn't believe that the company has turned around and all this stuff. You know, well, the worst thing I could do is tell them what happened, because that would just breed more distrust to the upper organization. So I turned in my reimbursements. A couple weeks later, sometimes 3 weeks later, sometimes 4 weeks later, I get my reimbursement back, but it was at the time where we didn't need the money, but it was there. So we went through that whole thing, and the level of morale within the employees skyrocketed. The trust of myself and the managers that work with me and below me was also brought to a higher level. And again, the employees never knew the difference, nor should they. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is it's one of those things where sometimes an opportunity is created where you can, you know, if you're ready to listen and open to a little bit of risk, you know, it doesn't have to be a financial commitment like that, because I wasn't really risking any financial. I knew the company would pay me back, but it was a risk of, what if for some reason I got fired in between? What are we going to do? And but things went really well. And the nice thing about it is, you know, all the other managers that were aware of this saw how little it took to gain that. And again, it was by serving the people. And so, you know, I don't have my degrees hung up in my office, and I might have a Bible verse by the computer, but that's about it. But when people ask, you know, why I am the way I am, I can share that with them. But if, you know, I want them to see it before I have to tell them. You know, if they can't see it in me, it really is meaningless, whether I'm a Christian or whether I'm a servant or anything like that. So the last part of that story, though, is the upper management. When they found out this was taking place, they were furious. The finance people, the human resources people were both very upset that we did this, and we did it the way we did it. And of course, my boss, to his credit, he defended that. He gave me the go-ahead and used the fact that I was new to not understand the process. And so there was a little bit of a fudge there, but in the end, you know, I guess the point I'm trying to make is there are so many things you can do when you're in your workplace to help people. it's not financial. Most of the time it's just caring. If they're having a tough day, I give my people a mental health day, and I'll tell them that. I said, well, take the day off and just go do whatever. Your assignment is to work from home while you're on the couch, because I know when they come back the next day, they're going to be in better shape, they're going to be more productive, they're going to be more engaged. But that's not the way a lot of companies are. And I think it's something, not only when you're working, but you have to do that in life too. When you're having an interaction with somebody, especially in a volunteer situation, sometimes you just need a day off and come back and you're recharged again. So work is different for everybody, and the rewards of work are different for everybody. And there's days that I don't necessarily want to get up and go in, but I do. And it's like every one of you. And I'm sure every one of you have experienced a very difficult coworker, a very difficult boss. And again, you have control of how you respond to that with your attitude. And sometimes that's the toughest fight you ever have in your life. But if you can take the high road or that one extra minute of patience or extra day of patience, it makes a big difference. And who knows what that will do for that person further down in their life. So that's what I do.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you sharing. Next up, we have a project manager from one of my favorite places, Federal Premium Ammunition, and Beihoffer to share her story. So, Ann.
Okay, thanks for the introduction. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Ann Beihoffer, and I do work at Federal Premium Ammunition. I'm a project manager, and just a little bit about how I got there. My degree is actually in information technology and business, and I've worked at various big companies in the metro area, but about 10 years ago, well actually probably about 11 years ago, I didn't recognize it at the time as being God, because I kind of followed away from church, but he was watching out for me, and he brought me to Federal, and it's just been an extraordinary journey for me. So a couple of things that I'll share today are about that journey. So what does a project manager do? Basically, I set plans. I try to make sure that things happen on plan. A lot of times I feel like I'm a professional nag because I'm constantly following up and making sure that things get done. My husband would say I practice that a lot at home with him. So I guess it comes naturally, I don't know. But in terms of how does my work contribute to the good of others, sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit of an average Joe. Last week some people that are teachers shared their stories, and there's such a direct impact on little lives and things that they can do to influence those people. But as I think about, we're all God's children, and whether you're working with little God's children or big God's children, we all have that opportunity. And really, just as Mark spoke about. And then more directly, I think about our ammunition. Soldiers use it to protect our country. Police officers use it to protect our communities. Consumers use it to do recreation or competitions, or my favorite passion, which is going hunting to put food on the table. And so, kind of related to that first question, a verse that I think is important is Colossians 3, verse 23. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters. What talents do you use most in your work? So my strengths, according to the Strength Finder, are arranger, achiever, empathy, developer, and belief. And so I think I have a unique opportunity to bring those things together. So the arranger part of it is figuring out all the tasks that we need to do and putting together a plan. Achiever, I'm all about achieving, just getting stuff done. And I would say that in the past I've made a lot of mistakes along those lines too. Earlier in my career I would get so hung up on achieving that I would kind of forget about everything else. I was so focused on getting things done that I didn't take into account necessarily as much as I should have the thoughts and feelings of people that were on my team. So I've really tried to work on that and improve in that area. And that's where I think the empathy and developer comes into play. So I try to take a look at what the individual needs of the person are, like Mark kind of talked about, do unto others as they they would kind of, what would be important for them. And then I think the big thing is just belief. So I have belief in my team, I have belief in their abilities, and I see, it's kind of like, keep your eye on the prize. So I try to focus on just accomplishing the goal and making it happen, and really just being in tune with believing in my team. So a verse that kind of resonates with me from that perspective is Jeremiah 12:2. You have planted them, and they have taken root. They grow and bear fruit. And so when I think about that, it's not necessarily that I'm like this great inspirational person that can, turn somebody's life around or anything like that. But if I can help, like, plant a seed with somebody, or I can help somebody grow on their development path, it may not be the biggest, grandest thing out there, but each little piece and part that every one of us does helps other people to grow. What brings you the greatest satisfaction in your work? I would say, obviously, getting the job done, but also, like I talked about, just really seeing how people grow, how they develop, and how they can accomplish the goal of the project is really important. Another thing I would say is that over the past year, it's kind of like when you get a New Year's resolution, you pick something you want to work on. One of my coworkers at Federal is a great Christian, and he had said, like in January of last year, that he was really working on bringing grace to the job. So not getting flustered about the small stuff, just really bringing grace to the way that you conduct yourself and how you do your job. So I tried that for the past year, and I think it was really helpful for me in terms of just really riding above the waves. You can have a lot of ups and downs at work and a lot of challenges and a lot of really hard stuff. But if you just try to look at it with grace and think about how will God look at this situation, it's been really helpful. So my word for this year is attitude. And I felt like God was putting it on my heart. And then I got a new project in January where that's become really relevant. It's a project I have to work on that isn't so much about building new, it's kind of about tearing down old. And at first I was like, oh, how am I going to do this? And I'm more wired to like move forward and build new. But what I'm starting to learn, I'm sure I haven't learned the whole lesson yet, is that I just have to look at it with the right attitude and look for where can I learn from it, where can I grow. And sometimes tearing down the old, it's just like when you burn down old brush, it allows the new stuff to grow. So I'm trying to really make attitude my word for this year. And then I guess just a couple things in terms of representing the presence of Christ in your work. So I pray for people. I've shared before, I think that I've had some tough relationships at work, and I've prayed for those individuals and for the relationships to be healed, and it's amazing what God has done. Two of the people that I've had the toughest time with now are like my most trusted people at work, so it's just been us. And it's not Laverne who's here from my work. She's not the one, but it's been really cool. I think the other lesson I would share with you is it took me a lot of years to figure out to just be okay with who I was. I worked for 10 years at a major retail corporation in the metro area, and I went through incredible amounts of pressure and just downtime on myself because the pressure was there to always go to the next level. And I never really felt right with that, but I felt like that was what I had to do, and I put myself through all kinds of stress and working incredibly awful hours because I felt like I had to do that. And now I feel like since I've gone to Federal, I can be who I am. I don't need to go to the next level. That's not where I'm going to be successful, and I'm okay with that. But it took me a long time to figure that out. So for those of you that are younger in your careers out there, just keep that in mind, that if it feels like not the right thing to be doing, don't do it. So lastly, just to close, a verse that resonates with me to that point is Proverbs 16, verse 3. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans. So just keep that in mind and follow your heart with your plans. Thank you.
Wow. All right. Thanks, Ann. As you can see, they both clearly have found their niche and the heart's in the right place. Our next speaker up is a community outreach specialist. It's me. I'm sorry. It's also the title, I guess, be your elected sheriff. So my story, I'm going to use an outline to keep me focused because for those who know me, I I could turn this into a 4-hour talk pretty easy. And I figured it would actually be okay if I ran to like 2 as long as I brought in lunch. However, I know my family would be the first to get up and walk out, which might start a tradition, or everybody else is going to follow us. So I will use my script to kind of stay on track here. And I'd like to also say that, while my greatest joy does come from my incredible family, today I'm to focus on my work and how that we try to use that to impact others. So my current role is as the elected Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Anoka County, and I still can't even believe those words can come out of my mouth. It was certainly never necessarily a goal of mine, which I'll talk more about. So as the sheriff, I oversee the sheriff's office. Within our office, we have 6 different divisions. They provide a wide array of services to all of Anoka County. We have a Justice Services Division, and their responsibilities include providing security for the courthouse and the courtrooms and the judges. We have a Civil Process Unit, a Warrants Unit, a Records Unit. Within our Patrol Division, they provide the police services. You see the squads all over the county. We also provide countywide SWAT, K-9, Marine Unit, UAS services. The list goes on. Our Administrative Division, we provide law enforcement training regionally and even further out. We've had people come from all over the world to train right here in Anoka County, which makes me also very proud. We provide gun permits. They handle all HR matters, policy and grant development, as well as outreach programs and initiatives that they're responsible for developing. So every time the sheriff goes to a conference, comes back with all these crazy ideas and neat things we'd like to see roll out, they're the ones who usually draw short straws. I say, okay, guess what you're going to be working on now? So they get a little nervous when I go to conferences. We have our Midwest Regional Forensics Laboratory. All of the latent fingerprint work, drug chemistry work, and DNA processes for all of Anoka County, Sherburne, and Wright counties are done through our office. Of course, the jail, responsible for inmate housing, even when it's overcrowded as it is, they do a great job down there. We also provide a lot of development programs, including GED, anger management, parenting, and things like that, trying to help them become the person that they were designed to be and to overcome the mistakes that they've made. We also are responsible for their medical and dental and things like that while they're in custody. Our Criminal Investigative Division, whether you have a police department or not in your community, the Sheriff's Office handles all major crimes for all of Anoka County, including the homicides, rapes, robberies, assaults, elderly cases, juvenile cases, arson, and our Criminal Investigative Division also oversees our Drug Task Force and our Welfare Fraud Unit, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the high-level flyover of our office. Our collective work does contribute to the good of others in society in a wide variety of ways. We help them through their current crisis and provide, or at least direct them to the appropriate resources to help them overcome whatever they're facing at the time. We also provide outreach training. We've developed literally dozens of new programs that are new and innovative, many first in the state, that are really focused on educating, enhancing safety, and improving the lives in our communities. I'm also in supporting roles or a board member for numerous civic groups and outreach type organizations. In addition to the Sheriff's Office and local community roles, I've been privileged to work on several committees and am now on the executive board as the 3rd Vice President for the Minnesota Sheriff's Association. I'm also on several committees and was elected to the board of directors for the National Sheriff's Association, and because I just can't beat myself up enough, I guess, I'm currently in the campaign process, reaching across our nation as I seek a position on the executive board for the National Sheriff's Association. Now, I don't relish in sharing my resume, but I think it's important to understand kind of who the office is, who I am, because to know my youth and my upbringing, that would lead most people to assume that I might have ended up in a jail, not running one. True story. I know that I would not have accomplished these things without the support of an absolutely incredible family and without the blessings and guidance from God. So I was a product of multiple divorces. We moved a lot. The house was basically alcoholic and abusive, and I grew up visiting my dad in prison when my grandmother was willing to come pick me up to go see him, etc., etc. But due to a positive contact that I had with a police officer as a kid, I knew that I wanted to be one of the good guys. And that contact taught me a couple of very important things. One, our work matters. And so that's what really resonates with me as a part of this sermon series. And two, our attitudes matter. So as I grew up, I wanted to be a cop. And I wanted to have a positive impact in the lives of others like they had done to me. And that goal was achieved when I became a deputy. I later became a SWAT team member, a training officer, an honor guard unit commander, and that list also goes on. I've been afforded a lot of opportunity. And the interesting thing was, I figured I'd arrived. I was content. That was what I wanted. That's where I wanted to be. And it is a very noble profession, and I'm grateful for every person who's willing to take those things on. And I got shaken out of my comfort zone. One day, a death notification call came at work, and the short version is it led me to Prairie Oak Community Church and a much deeper relationship with Christ. And that's a whole other talk that you can buy me coffee and we can talk about that some other time. I learned that while I was content with my achieved goals, that God still had other plans for my life. In fact, I continue to learn that He has a lot of other plans, and sometimes I need that seatbelt to keep me focused and in place. There's been many God moments along the way that required me to evaluate my own contentment versus God's will for my life. And again, that's a different talk. I knew I would have a habit of wanting to go off and talk about each of these things, and that's why I'm trying to stay on track to get you out here by 2. Time and time again over the years, I kept hearing the message, be brave and courageous. And that came and kept returning every time I felt led to tackle some of these new challenges. Challenges that were not in my wheelhouse, and oftentimes not even in my areas of interest. As an example, I recall clearly, and in fact I'm often reminded by some of our staff members that years ago, as they said, hey, when the sheriff decides to retire, you should run for sheriff. And my response was typically, no thank you. And they remind me of that, and I do remember that. In fact, some of them reminded me, I often said, that will never happen. God's reminded me that those things that we don't think are ever going to happen can happen. My time at Prairie Oak and listening to Pastor Steve's messages have pushed me. This place has pushed me. And God has pushed me to pray and to listen and to be obedient. Prairie Oak and God have also pushed me something that this place is known for. They pushed me outside of my comfort zone to see a much bigger picture, to listen for God's direction, and to achieve more despite the challenges that are before me. Pastor Steve has mentioned in the past how hard it can be sometimes for us to remember that we are literally under attack by the devil. I don't have that problem. Every morning at work, my day starts by reading our on-call reports, which is basically a Reader's Digest summary of events around the county. For the younger people in the crowd, it's a summary of every major incident that has occurred across the county from the day before. So when you start out each day reading about the assaults, the rapes, the robberies, the overdoses, the despair and the violence in our communities, it's a constant wake-up call and a reminder that our communities and our families are under attack. Last week, Cindy talked about the whack-a-mole game as it relates to the daily challenges, and I love that analogy, and I totally agree. Except that for me, I feel like it's a little bit more like stomping out fires each day. Actually, all day long. I stomp out the closest and most dangerous fire first and try to get to as many as possible. Sometimes they go out easy. Others sting a little bit. And yet others require great effort and leave you hurting for longer periods of time. But oftentimes, the greater the challenge, the greater the reward. And when it feels insurmountable, I am reminded of Philippians 4:13, that I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. So I get my reward from achieving positive change. And this is a big part of why I really enjoy the youth and community outreach aspect of my job. I share my stories with others, especially kids, and it's kids of all ages, to explain how our circumstances do not define what we are capable of achieving. And while, like the teachers, I cannot preach openly in my work environment, I do have the luxury of a little more latitude. I use my strengths to reach, encourage, and hopefully inspire others. For those who have taken the test and are tracking that, my assessed strengths are woo, communication, strategic, futuristic, and empathy. And I get to use those attributes throughout notes to others, through speeches, through our programs, through our outreach, and like the others that you've heard, through example. I have the privilege of using those opportunities both locally and nationally. I share Christ's influence whenever possible in staff meetings, expectations, and vision talks with our teams, as well as speaking at schools and universities. And when a kid asks me what my greatest tool or weapon is, it's kind of fun for me to watch their eyes because they expect me to talk about tasers and handguns. But instead, when I talk about my greatest tool is my faith, you can actually imagine them being caught off guard is what I use as a tool to draw them in. We each have the same ability to share our stories and to influence others for the kingdom. We have a broader influence than we realize. As an example, did you know that when you enter a room, you affect the climate? You either bring a smile and you spread the light, or you cause tension and literally drain the life from the room. Knowing that, I try to be very intentional about spreading positivity within my circles of influence, regardless of how my day is going. And I know that light comes from Jesus Christ. So does my ability to achieve more than I ever could have thought possible. Over the years, I have learned that it is not my will, but His. I need to quiet myself and listen more, and that continues to be a struggle for me, probably for all of us in this day and age. Turn off the electronics, step away from the TV, or as I like to remind myself, just shut up and listen. I need to quiet myself more and listen, and we all need to pray for His direction. At one point, I was content to be a deputy responding from call to call. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a noble profession. I found it very rewarding. But for my path, I listened and I followed. And that brought me into leadership roles with the sheriff's office, and then command positions with the sheriff's office. Then as an elected official, then a variety of metro leadership roles, and then state and national roles, and now state and national leadership. And it is literally nothing I would have wanted or could have even dreamt for myself. But God led me from working with and serving a handful of citizens each day to running large organizations, to incredible community partnerships, to working with and having influence with leaders across our nation. The irony behind it all, as I said, it was not my will. In fact, I often felt like Moses, and as I prayed and as these things were laid on my heart, as there was a variety of affirmations occurring that, yep, that's the next step. A common part of my prayer, and someday I expect God and I will be able to reminisce and giggle a little bit about this, but there were many, many times, and continue to be times where I'm thinking, God, are you sure? It doesn't sound like me. I'm sure somebody else would want that. I'm sure somebody else would be way better at it, so I'm going to go ahead and keep down this path until you give me that not put in the head moment that, yeah, that's where you want me. And tragically for me, those moments usually come often and clear. You open my eyes, it isn't about me. So if I want to make a positive difference, then I need to quiet myself, listen, and follow. And wherever I am, I need to shine Christ's light back into this dark world. We all do. My amazing bride reminded me recently that most non-church people don't just wake up one day and decide to go to church. They often need some form of inspiration. This is a part of the Great Commission, and it is literally our duty to set a Christ-like example so that others are so moved, so intrigued, that they will want whatever it is that we have, including getting up earlier on a Sunday morning and bringing themselves to a church. Hopefully our church, but a church, to open their hearts and minds to Christ. We don't have to be afraid of that because it's not our fight, and the battle is literally already won. Just as God wants us to use this place beyond our imagination, He also wants to use you beyond what you can imagine. It's not always an easy walk, believe me, I know that. There will be attacks. But would the devil bother with you if you were not of significance to God's kingdom? So if you're feeling a little beat up today, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's because you are literally on the edge of kingdom greatness. So remember to pause, to pray, and to listen, because it could just take you from being like Moses saying, are you sure? I don't know about this, to standing up with confidence and saying, here am I, Lord, send me. When it doesn't feel like it matters or that you're making a difference, think about that large ship at sea. And I've given this analogy to all of our command staff, most of whom are Christians, and that's a part of what we're trying to create within our culture. What would you call it? Covertly. And so when it doesn't feel like you're making a difference, just remember those big ships out at sea, because when we're facing this direction, we see the ocean, we see the horizon, and we see the skyline above. If we're going this direction, but we want our culture, we want our friends, we want our family, we want those around us to actually end up over here, literally at the foot of the cross. Just turn the wheel. And when you're turning that wheel, it doesn't feel any different. You're not seeing a difference. Why? Because we're still looking at ocean, we're still looking at a horizon, we're still looking at a skyline. It doesn't look any different. It doesn't feel any different. But you are changing the course. So stay the course and keep up the good fight. Don't give up. And as I remind our command staff, don't let go of the wheel. You are making a difference. So I'll wrap up by asking that you never forget who we serve, and for that reason, serve with joy, and to be the example for His glory, so that one day we may all stand together before the Lord and hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant."